Can you see me now? Good, excellent. So, just at the level of conversation before we start, this will be shown in India. Okay, that's all right. I just need to be aware. What I want to do is to concentrate on the future, because I can see very clearly what the way forward is. There are three levels, as I will explain: the nation state, above it the international, and above that the supranational. And nobody's doing the supranational. It's all international. The UN, the nation states at an international level. But to introduce a new supranational level above the international level would be a way forward. And I just at the level of conversation, my credentials are that for the WPF, that's the World Philosophical Forum, I've been the chairman of the Supreme Council of Humanity for 6 years. For the World Intellectual Forum, that's another forum, I'm chairman of a working group, and this is on global good governance, and it's studying just this. So I've already given a PowerPoint presentation to India just on this subject. And so we're getting it out there around the world, but it's really urgent at present because we have nuclear threats and nuclear Armageddon being spoken of. And this is the most dangerous time since the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1960, was it about 1962. So 60 years ago. And something needs to happen. And the UN has not got the authority to go higher up. So we can talk about your questions, no problem. But can we leave room, or possibly even do this at the beginning, because this is really, really serious and urgent. And I'm not concerned with the present. I'm concerned with the future and getting a meeting of the US, the EU, Russia, and China to look at that, to look ahead at a new world order. We were going to talk about the new world order, but actually this is a new world order that we're trying to build. We're trying to reshape the future. The present will be between nation states at the international level. But each nation state is thinking, what is next? And this is very important. So over to you. Okay. 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 So long as I can understand the questions, no problem. Yeah. We can. Thank you. Thank you. So in 2004, when I wrote The Syndicate, it seemed as though there were two New World Orders. But since then, there could be as many as 5 competing New World Orders, certainly 4. So there's the Western New World Order, which is America and perhaps the World Economic Forum. And their plans for digitalizing the world. There's also the Syndicate New World Order, which is the group of very powerful families, about 20 of them, that really control the oil and gas. There are 457 oil and gas pipelines, and those members of the syndicate control indirectly a number of those. And they may be included in the first New World Order. There's also developing a possible Russian New World Order, but I don't think that will be worldwide. It won't be global. It will be part of the world. And there's also possibly a Chinese New World Order, because the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative has 140 countries that it's helped, and that is a large part of the world. 193 nation states in the UN, and 140 of them are in the Chinese Economic Assistance Program. So again, that won't be completely global. It won't be a total New World Order, but it will be a partial New World Order. And then there's the New World Order that actually I'm involved in trying to deliver in a small way to bring people together. And this sees a partly federal world government. It sees a world parliamentary assembly, possibly based in the UN General Assembly initially, part-time, just to get it going. It sees a world Senate higher up, and eventually a world president. And this would solve 7 problems. It would only deal in 7 areas. So every nation state would be the same as now internally, and internationally it would be the same as now, except for 7 areas. And the 7 areas are giving the new world state, the new world government, legal powers to abolish and end all wars and to organize disarmament. It would be sharing resources and energy supplies for the benefit of all humankind. It would be solving environmental problems like climate change. It would be ending disease and, of course, COVID. It would be extending education, science and skills. It would be delivering growth in the world economy and solving all the financial problems of the world. And lastly, it would bring spirituality or religions together, so there are no longer wars between religions, including terrorist wars by some religions. So this partly federal body would organize the solution to all those with more powers than the UN have. there are three levels or strata at present. There's the nation state, and then above the nation state, there's the international level. And above the international level is the supranational level. And at present, the UN is at the international level, and it lacks powers. It has no power to enforce things. It's diplomatic. It's people visiting and talking and negotiating and requesting. So this nation state, this partly federal state would be given new powers by the World Parliamentary Assembly, which would be agreed to by the World Senate. And the point is, all nations of humankind would be in this world state. It would not be America only, or Russia only, or China only. It would be a combination of all of them acting jointly. I was in Japan many years ago, nearly 60 years ago, and besides being tutor to Emperor Hirohito's younger son for 3 years, I had various experiences at a more mystical level, which changed the way I view the world. And my mystic way gave me the ability to, or the instinctive ability to see the universe as a unity and all humankind as a unity. Like a cosmonaut on the moon looking at the Earth. The Earth looks one ball. How can it be divided? The cosmonaut must think. And so what I'm trying to do is to see that behind all conflicts there is harmony. And this is a very Eastern idea I learned in Japan. And a friend of Ezra Pound's wrote out for me, a Japanese professor who is now dead and poet, Junzaburo Nishiwaki. He wrote out an algebraic formula: plus A plus minus A equals 0. Plus A plus minus A. Night and day, life and death, time and eternity, all the opposites, Russia and this country. But behind it all is 0, unity. And this is the Confucian way of thinking in the East, the Taoist way, yin and yang, light and dark, male and female, all in a unity. And that thinking means that no matter how deep the conflict is, no matter how bad the conflict is, there is always a unity beneath. But it needs one person to go and visit this president, visit that president, and another president, and establish the common ground, not for the present, for the future, so that there is a road in the next 10 years away from where we are now, with division and war, and into something harmonious, and that is what I would like to see. I wrote 3 books, which I have here. I've written 60 books altogether, but that was the first one, The World Government in 2010, and the second one was World State in 2018, and the third one was World Constitution. And I was asked to be chairman of a working group at the World Intellectual Forum, which covers all the world. And so this is a working group on global good governance, and this is what I have developed in my books and also in talking to India so far, and there are other parts of the world I am talking to this autumn and the spring, and eventually to the UN. But I'm trying to bring together instinctively so that the apparent opposites are united in underlying harmony, and the whole world will benefit from it. And I am 83 now. I'm very active for 83. I am still writing books. I'm still working a full day. But at 83, my gift to the world's grandchildren is to leave a peaceful world before I eventually cease to be here. So this is the new world order that I would like to see, a new world order that includes America, but America is not the leader. America has taken its place through discussion. Everybody has to give up. Everybody has sovereignty. Every nation state has sovereignty. Internally, it is no different. And internationally, it is no different, except for the 7 areas I read out. And so in those areas, every nation state in the UN gives up a little sovereignty, not much, just a little sovereignty, e.g. on wars and on disarmament and on energy and on climate change and so on, to make all humankind better. But it does not go down in giving that up. The idea is to save money. At present, $2 trillion, $2.117 trillion are spent on wars and armies and military. And if that money could be switched to the economy, there would be prosperity. The world would be full of prosperity. And that's a gift that in my writing, I would like to leave to the world. And of course, in other areas, there would be savings as well. So this would be a very good thing for the world. And one last point, Socrates, the Greek philosopher who began philosophy in a way in the West, said, according to Plutarch in Of Banishment, De Exilio, he said, I am not an Athenian or a Greek, I am a citizen of the world. So Socrates is saying, I am not belonging to a country or a town. I'm not a Londoner. I am not a Muscovite, meaning Moscow. I am not just my own country, Greece in his case, but I belong to the whole world and all humankind. And that is what I am trying to do, to belong to the whole of humankind and make all humankind's situation better. Russian situation better, American situation better, Chinese situation better, the EU citizens' situation better, everybody's situation better, without having to destroy or cause death or injury. Does that make sense? I didn't quite understand the beginning of the question. Could you read the first line again? No. So Ukraine is a problem that must be solved at the international level by negotiation and discussion. And there will come a time, a right time, when that should happen. But I'm looking at the future, the way forward, and also the context, because at present we are near nuclear war if we are not careful. We have the word nuclear war being mentioned in different countries. Recently, President Biden said we are near nuclear Armageddon. So we have to be careful and cautious. And so something has to happen. The world cannot go on as at present. The system has failed because it has resulted in what we are living through now. So the UN has not got the power or authority to do anything. It is a viewer. There have been 162 wars between 1945 and 2017 that the UN has been unable to stop. And right now, I think there are 37, perhaps 40 wars in different parts of the world that the UN is powerless, has not the power to stop. And so the equivalent of the UN, this higher body, the supranational body, which would be linked to the international level by the UN Secretary General. The UN Secretary General is very important. So he would be the link between the international level at present and the supranational world government higher up, with powers created from a meeting in the UN General Assembly by an early world government with MPs. 850 seats. In one of my books, I list where they would come from. So that will take a bit of time, and it's important to stop Ukraine now. So there would be an immediate ceasefire, as I see it. This is just me, in Ukraine. The ceasefire would be while there are discussions, while things are happening, and so on. The way to create a harmonious future is not to humiliate or to make any leader very angry. What happened at the end of the First World War was a disaster. It led to the Second World War. Germany was very, very angry at the settlements. And then what happened at the end of the Second World War may also have been a problem. And what happened in 1991 may have caused further anger and resentments and problems. And I'm thinking of Russia here. And all these have to be taken on board, and there has to be a negotiation for a future redesigned world, a world that's completely different from how it is today, but with no unipolar domination by one power. It's multipolar. We have 4 poles at least. We have America, we have Russia, we have China, and we have the EU, Europe. And there may be more poles. India is coming up. And so, as I see it, there's an urgent thing just to stop and talk. That's the first thing. But secondly, it's the long-term solution. And that will be a mixture, a combination of negotiation, this leader and that leader, and territory, and working out where we're at and what the future is, and so on. And there are historical reasons for all wars. Ukraine, for example, Khrushchev was Ukrainian. And there are many reasons as to why Russia should not be completely excluded from Ukraine. But at the same time, there are many reasons why Ukraine should get back what it had before, and rebuilding and reconstitution, that can that must be a priority to get things back to how they were. To stop, and there's that beautiful bridge, and the bridge has been wars. There comes a point where nobody benefits from a war. Hitler in Germany. Germany was in ruins. Berlin was in ruins at the end of the war. People were living in ruins, barely with a roof over their heads. And his dreams didn't work. But you can see why he did what he did, because it goes back to 1918 and the settlement that was bad then. And all politicians in Germany in the 1930s were trying to make things better. So one's got to be very wise. That's what I'm trying to say. Now is the time for wisdom. Now is the time to put humankind first, humanity first. And in the World Philosophical Forum, I have been the chairman of the Supreme Council of Humanity for 6 years. And I'm concerned that all humankind everywhere, the poor, the starving, those without shoes on their feet, everywhere, should be treated as human beings. And everybody, I know Russia, I've had tremendous respect for Russia. I read, when I was 18 or 19, I read all Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Turgenev, all the classical writers. Solzhenitsyn, many years ago, asked for 4 of my books. And when I was in Moscow, I took them to him. And I was in Moscow in 2019. And I gave a lecture. I was invited. I gave a lecture in Moscow's Civic Chamber on the 22nd of April, 2019, on a world state, on the subject I'm describing, on the future. And I was asked to sign books, copies of the World State and World Constitution for President Putin and for 3 of his assistants. And I was being interviewed on one of my books on American television in 2021 in November. And the interviewer said, I know President Biden, and he will be very interested in what you are saying. This was my selected letters I was being interviewed on. Please sign your 2 books, World State and World Constitution, to President Biden. So he has the books. So both President Putin and President Biden have signed copies from me of the 2 books that, 2 of the 3 books that are now the basis for the various conferences I'm holding in different parts of the world. The EU is coming up, America, India's already done, to try and get this idea across that here is a future new world order. It's a world order that, in my view, everyone must be happy with. Everyone must feel they have won. This must be plus A plus minus A equals naught. All the contradictions in Chinese thinking are resolved. And President Xi of China would understand this Confucian thinking. Plus A plus minus A equals 0. That's where it came from China, about 2,500 years ago. And so this wise thinking, a group within the World Intellectual Forum have just set up the World Wisdom Forum. and they've asked me to front that. So there are 4 forums in the world. There's the World Economic Forum, which is Klaus Schwab and economic and associated with the Western New World Order. There's the World Philosophical Forum, which brought in the universal state of the Earth, which I hoped to bring in 2015. There's the World Intellectual Forum, and there's the World Wisdom Forum. So I'm involved in 3 of the 4 forums, and eventually it could be that we get together with the World Economic Forum, and all differences are ironed out. There is unity, and the unity is something that Russia understands, because the Soviet Union was a unity, and establishing a world unity is something that Russia has had experience in. And so coming back to my view of civilizations, may I just mention this? So in terms of my history, you mentioned in an email the fire and the stones. And that's the fire and the stones. And that was a study of 25 civilizations, and it came out in 1991. And the 25 civilizations all go through 61 similar stages. So each civilization has a union. The Soviet Union has become the Russian Federation. That was from stage 43 to stage 46. The European Union has gone into a union. The European civilization is now in stage 43. One day it will be a federation. The United Kingdom is a union. One day that will be a federation of the British Isles, and it may be happening now. So these are all in the 40s, stage 43, stage 46, out of 61 stages. And federalism is a feature of stage 46, as in the Russian Federation. And America is different because it was founded in 1607, 400 years ago, and the 400th anniversary was in 2007. So America is young, and it's in stage 15, which is the same stage the Roman Empire was in, when the Roman Empire was very powerful. And my concern is to get everyone together at a time when the young America can be constructive in the way I was describing, not dominant, not about America first, about humankind first, and bring in a new world order for all humankind that can be democratic, that can be full of freedom, that will not reduce us to machines. There's a suggestion that the World Economic Forum's digitalization of humankind will create a world of slaves. So our minds are controlled by our governments, and we walk about in a kind of dream, controlled there. And we don't want that. We want freedom for the brain from digital manipulation. So that's the New World Order that I would like to see. Not an authoritarian, slave-driving New World Order where humankind is miserable, but a prosperous, peaceful New World Order where everyone is happy and everyone can go about their lives and the real statesmanship is to build such a new world order. And it needs really clever people to do it. And some of the existing leaders, President Xi and President Putin and President Biden, with help, with the right guidance, could set us on the road to that. And then a new generation of leaders in the future will carry it forward and more. But it means it means discussing it and making clear to everyone that every country is internally the same and internationally the same, except in those 7 areas where improvements to the world, which everyone wants, will be made and money saved out of it. So I am prepared to go anywhere and meet anybody to explain this. When I was in Moscow in 2019, I was in touch with President Putin's assistants. I had a very good time. I was very respectful of everything to do with the Russian tradition and with the Russia I saw. And I will gladly speak to an assistant of President Putin or do whatever is necessary to get the understanding of what I'm proposing in the future clear. We just had a few minutes, really. This is the future. But nobody else has come up with an idea for the future that's different from the present. People are saying, oh, it will be within the present and more and more and more, 2030 and 2050, perhaps net zero in 2050 and so on. But it needs a new plan. It needs starting afresh. And it needs a group of leaders to agree this and take it forward. And I will, with my books and my studying, my 60 books are about universalism. And universalism is the study of the unity of the universe and of all humankind in every discipline. So in philosophy, in fact, it's mysticism, literature, philosophy and science, history, religion, international politics and statecraft, and culture, world culture. And there are many more disciplines, and they all have to be brought together. And in the Renaissance, about 1500 AD, it was much easier because knowledge was less. But today, there is so much knowledge and it's so more sophisticated that it's hard to unify it all. But it must be unified. So universalism is unifying all knowledge, seeing every discipline, all history is one subject, one discipline, not just British history, not just Russian history, not just Chinese history. It must We were cut off. I don't know why. Perhaps there was a time limit. Perhaps we exceeded our time. I don't know, but I'm back now. So over to you. So go ahead. So I was just saying that universalism sees all disciplines as unities. So we must see as a whole, the whole of history, the whole of philosophy, the whole of international politics. If you look at the whole of international politics, there's Plato, who in the Republic wrote of Athens. It was a world state for Athens, only Athens. And then Dante wanted a world state. In the Middle Ages, Dante, D-A-N-T-E, and Kant, the philosopher Kant, the German philosopher, was very close to calling for a world state. And in the 20th century, there were a number of people. In 1945, after the 2 atomic bombs, President Truman was shocked, and he called for a world state, a world government. And Churchill did, Einstein did, Bertrand Russell, the philosopher, did, various others, J.F. Kennedy, and eventually Gorbachev did. And when I was in Moscow, I met Gorbachev's consultant, Vladimir Polyakov, I think. And he said to me that Gorbachev would be extremely interested in World State. In fact, I signed a book for him. So Gorbachev had a copy of World State. But I couldn't meet him because he was in hospital. So that didn't happen. So there must be people who understand all countries and understand the countries in the world as a whole, who set up the new world order. It's wrong to have self-interested people who are only interested in advancing a small number at the expense of the many, not the few, and ignoring the many. This is not about giving power to a few. This is to benefit all humankind and to advance all disciplines and the whole of disciplines. So in history, I was going to say before we were cut off, we have Toynbee's A Study of History. We have Gibbon's The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. And in fact, my book, The Fire and the Stones, a part of it was released as The Rise and Fall of Civilizations. So I'm very much in the tradition of Gibbon and Spengler and Toynbee. And Spengler wrote of the decline of the West. And my next book, which is not out yet, examines the idea of the fall of the West. So that will be out in December. So what I'm saying is that there must be a completely open mind that understands all the concerns of everyone to put together this kind of new world order that I'm describing. And the philosophers, the wisdom, there are various people in these intellectual wisdom forums who might be able to have a contribution. But the UN needs to adopt Guterres, the UN Secretary General, needs to make me a special ambassador. And when that happens, I can visit 1 or 2 key leaders as a special ambassador of the UN, with Guterres support. That hasn't happened yet. But this is a way forward for Ukraine, for Russia, for many other countries in the world, countries that in Africa, for example, that are finding things difficult at present. Completely new thinking, a new world order, not just the present world order with one or two changes and the same approach. This must be completely new thinking. So that's what I'm offering, and I'm not going campaigning for it. I'm just holding conferences like this and explaining to people. And eventually, I hope the UN General Assembly will invite me to speak to them. And for example, if somebody within Russia wants me to speak at the UN General Assembly, I will go and I will speak, saying just what I'm saying now. But I'm looking at it impartially. As I say, there is an international level where there is negotiation, and that's not what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get the future, get all countries moving forward into a better future where there's more money for everybody, more prosperity and peace and rebuilding of all buildings that have been destroyed. So reconstruction, that's what I'm trying to do. Yes. So that is right. In 2004, I brought out The Syndicate. That's this book, which I know has been translated into Russian. And there I identified two new world orders. And the role of America now is a question mark, because there have been a number of events, for example, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, where the American army and military have been out there, like the Roman army in the Roman Empire days. And now there is a kind of reflection going on as to whether this approach should continue or whether it should be different. And the pandemic has made a difference. The pandemic has changed people's thinking and attitude and made people more aware of the present and doing things differently. So that's the American end of it. It's a question mark. And in my view, the time is right for what I've been describing. The time is right for America, and it's right for Russia, and it's right for China. When a nuclear war becomes a possibility, then something new must happen. And that means the time is right for a completely new thing. And that's not for governments. Governments can't think anew in this way. They have their policies, they have their agendas, they have their programs, their manifestos. But completely new thinking happens in, for example, the World Intellectual Forum or the World Wisdom Forum or the World Philosophical Forum, where people are looking and thinking what the way forward and the best way forward is. So what you said about, I'm trying to remember the last point in your question. I think you were saying, is the United States awaiting destruction? The answer is all civilizations rise, which means they go up, and fall, which means they come down. So it's this, every civilization rises and falls. And it's rising in the first 15 or 20 stages. And so America is still rising, or it's about the end of its rise. And then it's the slow decline, it's a slow fall. And all other civilizations alive today are in different stages of a long decline. And union is closer to rise than federation. And after federation is occupation by another country. And after that, and so on, until in the end, what happened in Egypt happens when in one year, the Mesopotamian society and the ancient Egyptian society ended, or civilizations ended, and the Arab civilization began. So out of the end of the Egyptian and Mesopotamian civilizations came the beginning of the Arab civilization. So history stays still. There are different civilizations at different times. I see Russia as the Byzantine Russian civilization. The Russian civilization began in Byzantium, in Constantinople, and hence the Orthodox, the Byzantine Orthodox. So Russia, the Russian civilization, I see, has been going for over 2,000 years, from Byzantium to certainly just under 2,000 years to the present. And the Chinese civilization has been going for 4,000 years. So there's no definite time. A civilization can be destroyed at any time. If there were a nuclear war, then clearly the American civilization, if it were affected, would be set back. But it could revive and just carry on. If you look at the civilizations of the past, they have had disasters and they've revived. So it's the energy in the people. The people are very important. If the people have the energy and the willpower and the determination, and that's the leadership that gives them and makes them like that. So leadership affects the people, but also there's the civilization. So a civilization in stage 60 is not going to last very long. It may think it's going to last forever, but it won't. Hitler said that his German civilization would last for 1,000 years, and it lasted 5 years. So leaders can be very confident about the length of what they're doing, but there is underneath, if you study the laws of history, there are laws of civilizations. And once you reach a certain stage, then there's not very much you can do but make the best of the next stage. So if the United Kingdom ceases to be a union and becomes a federation, there must be an English Parliament and a Scottish Parliament, as there is, and a Welsh and a Northern Irish Parliament, as there is. So there will just be a new English Parliament for England only. And so the United Kingdom will become 4 countries, if that were to happen. And when that happens, it's very difficult to go back. It's very difficult for Russia in the Russian Federation to go back to the Soviet Union. The Union stage is stage 43. it was very difficult for the European Union to go back to the European Union when it becomes a federation. So when it ceases to be a union, it becomes a federation. And then no matter what they do, it will remain a federation. And that's what the history books show. I met Ezra Pound in 1970 in Rapallo in Italy and had an evening with him and discussed my poetic epic. I've written 2 poetic epics, Overlord about the Second World War, when Russia was a wartime ally of the UK and America. So it's about the alliance of Russia and the UK and America as Hitler is defeated in the last year of the war. And the beginning of the first use of the phrase New World Order was by Nelson Rockefeller, the American politician, in 1968. First of all, in 1962, he wrote The Future of Federalism, and that's important. Federalism was a Rockefeller idea, and the Rockefellers and the Russian leadership have been connected because in 1925, Rockefellers gave Stalin the money for his 5-year plans in return for half Russian oil. And when Svetlana Stalin, Stalin's daughter, asked me to visit her, and we had a 5-hour conversation while she was alive, I said to Svetlana Stalin, "Did you know that your father was in this business relationship with Rockefellers?" She said, "No, I had no idea. No idea." So it was quite secret, but the presence of the Rockefellers in the Russian leadership set up in the Soviet Union becomes understandable if you see what happened in 1925. So the whole question of when the New World Order came in, say 1968, possibly 1962. I met Pound in 1970. So, and Pound died very shortly afterwards, I think 1971. So I think probably he was too late to see the New World Order as we understand it. But he was a globalist. He had on his desk the latest canto in his own handwriting, which I read. It said a place of skulls, skull being what's under the hair of the skin of the head. And I remember it was a canto that says a place of skulls. And he'd written his one poem for 60 years. And I said to Pound, "You're a good person to see because you spent 60 years on one poem and it's still here. So you can advise me on the best narrative for the epic poem I want to write." But after meeting Pound for 5 or 6 hours, I decided not to use the modernist technique of Pound, but to go back to Wordsworth and Tennyson and to write blank verse, iambic pentameters. And so Overlord is 41,000 lines of blank verse about the Second World War. And Armageddon is 26,000 lines of blank verse about the war on terror and the hunt for bin Laden. So those are the 2 poetic epics I've done. But that was why I went to Pound. And in his cantos, he's reflected the cultures of the whole world, especially China. And he is regarded now as a Confucian, following Confucius, the Chinese philosopher of about 500 BC. And so I recognize Pound's Eastern influence. And I think from what I saw and from what I've read as well, Pound went wrong in the 1930s. He was living in Italy and he liked what Mussolini was doing on land, and he was too close to fascism. And he was not a fascist before then. In the 1920s, he was not. But in the 1930s, he was accused of anti-Semite language, fascist sympathies, and he was supposed to have been imprisoned. In fact, he was put in a mental hospital for 10 years, I think it was, after the war. And when I saw him, he was fairly silent. He listened a lot, but what he said was very, very worth listening to. He said to me, if you can see it, you can do it. If you can see your epic on the Second World War, where it begins and where it ends, you can do it. Seeing it's half the battle. And if Pound were beside me now, Pound would say, if you can see the New World Order, you can do it. Seeing it is half the battle. And the problem is no one has seen it yet. And it's simply through the experiences I had in Japan, which led me to look at the universe as a unity and all disciplines as a unity and history as a unity and international politics as a unity, and with one world state or one world government. There are not many who have this vision. I mentioned a few, Gorbachev being the last. So far as I am concerned, I am the only author who is saying this. I may be wrong. I apologize out there if somebody is doing the same, but I've not heard of them, and they haven't come to my attention. So I am a pioneer in this. I am going out on my own and trying to make something happen, as I said earlier, as a gift for the grandchildren and children's generation, to make the world a better place. And I know from what I saw when I was in Russia that President Putin wants to make the world a better place. I know that. And I know that Biden wants to make the world a better place. Everybody has this within them. If we could just get them to release and talk and discuss and build and construct and have a new world order, not an old world order, not a world order that is called new when it's really old, but a new world order, then that would be very good. And that is the way forward, as I see it, for Ukraine, for Russia, and for all countries that are suffering in different ways. Does that answer your question? Sorry, Stalin. Could you repeat that? There was talk of Rockefellers being involved in the removal of Khrushchev when Nikita Khrushchev ceased to be leader of the Soviet Union. Rockefeller visited before. There was talk of his being connected with the Council of the Elders. It's not completely known what role Rockefellers played in Russia, but it was to do with the central bank. Rothschilds, I think, controlled the Russian central bank after Lenin's revolution at an early stage. I think in 1919, Rothschilds were involved, and Rockefellers and Rothschilds were together in those days. All this is in the syndicate. And Rothschilds were very powerful in the 18th century and the 19th century. and Rockefellers were their protege. They taught Rockefellers in the 19th century. Rockefellers wanted railways, so Rothschilds gave the money or lent the money for Rockefellers to, and both of them had 5 sons. The Rothschilds had 5 sons who became central bankers. So there were 5 central banks in Europe: France, the UK, Austria, Italy, and so on. And Rockefellers had 5 sons who all went off into different areas, and oil was one of them. And the oil deal with Stalin was very important to Rockefellers, and they still control the oil near Azerbaijan and elsewhere, and are still involved. And in 1997, various things happened when Russia's energy was sold off for much less than it was worth. I think what should have been 3 billion was I think parts of Russia's energy was sold off for 1/10 of their actual price to different companies in the chaos after 1991, before the order that Vladimir Putin was able to re-establish. Probably at the beginning of President Yeltsin's time. So Rockefellers have been involved in the shipping of Russian oil and so on. And oil and natural gas are very important. Ukraine is very important to both those because oil and natural gas found in the Black Sea have to be transported across Ukraine in some cases. There are 2 pipelines, Soyuz and Brotherhood, across Ukraine. And then in eastern Ukraine, new deposits of natural gas, not oil, were discovered in 2012, 2012 and 2013 in the Black Sea. And these were within Ukrainian waters and Ukrainian territory then. And so what's happening in eastern Ukraine is complicated by the oil. And I think about a year ago or 2 years ago, Ukraine could almost be a competitor with Russia for the export of oil because of this new, natural gas, because of this discovery of natural gas in eastern Ukraine and the developing of it. And Royal Dutch Shell, Rothschilds were involved in helping with that, with getting the find out. So the whole thing is very complicated. The relationship between Rockefellers and Rothschilds at the present is very complicated. Officially, they are together in financing central banks and oil and various things, but in practice, they may be in competition. And this may be complicating the situation. And that's why I say plus A plus minus A equals 0. Confucian thinking, Chinese thinking that Pound had, behind every conflict there is harmony. And we desperately need to get back to that harmony, because if the conflict increases and nuclear warfare takes place on both sides, then the planet is going to be almost uninhabitable in large parts of it for a long time. And nobody wants that. Nobody in America wants that. Nobody in Russia wants that. Nobody in Ukraine wants that. Nobody anywhere wants that. And so now is the time to talk. Does it make sense? That's my question, not to you, but to everybody. That's right. There have been various groups, including the Club of Rome, who worked in the first half of the 20th century to try and achieve a new world order. And this is probably the syndicate's new world order. As I mentioned at the very beginning, there is a Western new world order involving America with perhaps the World Economic Forum and also perhaps the syndicate. And so the syndicate could change. The syndicate is very heavily involved in Russia and in China. Rothschilds have owned the central bank in China since 1982. Rothschilds and Rockefellers have been involved in money to Russia at different times and in different ways. So the syndicate includes bringing in China and Russia and America. The Federal Reserve is Rothschilds in America, the Central Bank of America. So these families in the syndicate are very, very important, and Pound knew about them. Pound was very concerned about them. But now that kind of new world order is less dependent on these secretive groups. I think if we leave that first new world order to one side, it may still happen. I don't know. But if we focus on the new world order I was describing, which is a humankind first new world order, humankind first, then this is a different kind of new world order that isn't associated. It's not associated with the groups you mentioned, the round table and so on. They can all come in. They may have a part to play. So they're not excluded. No one is excluded. In fact, excuse me, I'm just going to show you in the books, there is a chart. I'm trying to hold it up for you. There we are. So the structure of the New World Order, as I see it, which is in the books I showed, if you look at the left on the bottom, you've got the national level, that's at the bottom. Then the international level. And then higher up, you've got the supranational level at the top. And the top doesn't exist at present. This would be new. But the link between lower down and higher up would be this UN Secretary General, as I've said. So within here, within this chart, we actually have some of the groups mentioned. And Rockefellers and Rothschilds are welcome in that group. They can't control it. If they want to contribute funding, that would be excellent. But it won't be on a profiteering basis for a few. This will be to make humankind as a whole benefit. That's the New World Order I want. But it may be that it ends up as a New World Order with a few having all the money and the many not having any. And that I don't want. And that would be wrong for humankind. Thank you very much. So you're thanking me for the session, basically, and we are ending the session now. Absolutely. Yes. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening to me, and let's make it all happen. Mm. Okay, we're back. Yeah. It it may be. Can you hear me all right? You can hear? Good. It may be. Yes. If you look at the timing of Nord Sea 1 and 2, there were 4 pipelines. What happened was that on, I think it was the 24th, it was the 23rd. So the referendums were on the 23rd of September until the 27th. And the 4 pipelines were the 25th until the 28th. So there were 4 referendums, or 4 districts, regions in the referendums, and there were 4 damaged pipelines. So was the 4 a coincidence? And also the former Polish minister Skorski sent an email, or sorry, a post, I think, saying, "Thank you, USA." So there is, would Russia, which has been funding Ukraine out of its natural gas reserve, natural gas profits, would Russia destroy its own pipelines? I don't believe it. I don't believe that Russia would. It's said that it was a signal to the West, but a very strange signal to the West to deprive yourself of all this income and the future trade. It could be those pipelines can never be used again. It could be that 35 billion pounds, which is the project, the cost of the North Sea oil project, have stopped because the pipelines can't be repaired. It could be they can be repaired. I don't know. In the same way, would Russia have destroyed the bridge to Crimea. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Why should Russia destroy a bridge to Crimea? In the same way, why should Russia destroy pipelines that convey natural gas to Germany? It's completely counterproductive against Russia's self-interest. I don't believe it. So it could be, in reply to your question, yes, but there's no proof. It's just at the level of common sense. I think I think the world centers of power are the four I've mentioned: America, the EU, Russia, and China. Multipolar, and I think America doesn't want Brexit and is very connected with the EU. I think Russia, according to what I've heard, may have helped Brexit to split the EU by posts on social media. Certainly there were some strange social media posts which influenced people's votes. So that is a possibility. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know. It's speculation. But I would think Russia would want the EU to be less powerful rather than more powerful. China, I'm not sure that China has any particular strong view. Certainly, Brexit to many people has been a mistake because the UK is basically European. All the people, or the Romans invaded Britannia. And so when the Romans came, they found Celts. The Celts had come from Europe, near Germany, before that. All the inhabitants of the UK have come from Europe at different times, from different branches of the population of Europe. So the UK is in the European family. And it may say, oh, it is completely different and it's on its own. But actually, everyone can say they're Dutch, they came from Holland, or they came from Belgium, or the Saxons came from near Germany, and Anglo-Saxons, the Angles, also came from the continent. The Jutes came from Jutland and so on. All the Normans came from Normandy. So all the various sections of the UK population came from Europe. And the European civilization goes through its stages, and the UK goes through the same stages. And the European Union is still a union, and possibly by breaking away, the UK has advanced its decline by becoming a federation more quickly than otherwise. I agree with Harari that, and I have his book here, Sapiens. The future is humankind getting together and creating the prosperity. Excuse me just a minute, I'm just going to have some more voices. It's better. The future is the people, because they will create the prosperity in the kind of world state or world government that I've been describing, and the new world order that I've been describing. I think oil and gas will eventually be superseded by green energy, but not yet. The syndicates make a lot of money out of oil and gas, and the syndicates may have green alongside it, but so long as the syndicates are making money out of oil and gas, oil and gas will continue side by side with green energy. That's how I see it. So thank you for mentioning that I have the medal for a vision for the future. There aren't many who have a vision for the future, and I think having had this, I would like it spread, and anything you can suggest as to what I should do to spread it. But somehow somebody needs to write to the UN and say, here is somebody who can see a way forward. Meet this person. At present, the new is very difficult to be listened to by the old who are afraid their jobs are going to go. The new is a threat. And so everything will be the same except for this supranational tier at the top. So the jobs will not be threatened. All the jobs will stay the same. Internally, everything will be the same. But it needs explanation for this. And it would be good if I could be got to the UN somehow. I don't know by whom, perhaps by Americans, perhaps by Russians, perhaps by Chinese in the future, perhaps by EU in the future. But the UN is very protective, self-protective, and it doesn't want to lose the UN employees' jobs, which is why a clear explanation needs to be made that their jobs would be safe, but there would be this extra tier on the top. So the axis of confrontation, the request will come from the people. I mean, if you look at Iran at present, it's the women of Iran who are confronting and calling for change. And that it may be how it is in the future, that the people out there eventually will want some sort of humankind new world order. But in the meantime, it would be better if the leaders can be ahead of it and discuss and see a way forward. And this would be so helpful at present to what is happening in Russia and Ukraine, as I see it. There isn't anybody really at present. It's so new, the New World Order I was describing. There needs to be a leader. But first of all, it needs to be got off the ground. It needs to be identified with somebody. The Nobel Prize Committee can appoint someone in the future for this and draw attention to it. There are different ways of spreading the idea that the spiritual image of Christ, by Christ I mean selfless and wanting the benefit of all humankind, not self-interested and trying to make money and trying to think of one's own richness and ignore most of humankind. So by Christ, it's using a new world order to help all humankind. And that person doesn't really exist. In India, it used to be Mother Teresa who helped the poor. but that was just one small area of it. There was no state making there. There was no international international level of it. So we're waiting for a leader to come. That's right. So in one of the disciplines, philosophy and science, I've for some years studied a theory of everything. And I was fortunate to meet Sir Roger Penrose, who won a Nobel Prize for physics recently, and worked with Stephen Hawking. And he and I were at a conference, and we sat next to each other for several days and walked and talked. And I was able to say to him, you more than anyone in the world know about the Big Bang and how it began. And I could ask questions. And he confirmed what I thought about the origin of the universe and the origin of creation. And I'd also met John Barrow, who is the author of Theories of Everything, when he was alive. And at a conference, I had breakfast with him. And I remember saying to him over breakfast, in your theory of everything, is there love and is there harmony? And he said, no, I'm only in physics. I don't do that. I'm just the physical world. And I said, well, a theory of everything is everything. And it must include harmony. And it must include love. And so for 20 years, I've mulled this over. And at last, I've written it and it's finished. And it's called The Algorithm of Creation. And I've mentioned plus A plus minus A equals 0. That is the beginning of the algorithm of creation. The algorithm of creation is more complicated than that. But all opposites, if you look at the beginning, there were two particles before the Big Bang, plus and minus particles. Plus A plus minus A equals 0. Nothing, when there was nothing, when there was no Big Bang and nothing. And out of plus A plus minus A equals 0 came the Big Bang and came the universe. And so in one book, I've taken the reader in 20 sections from the before the Big Bang, when there was nothing, to after the end of the universe, when there are again just two particles. So it comes out of two particles and goes back to two particles. So that is being done now. It's being copy edited, and it's with a publisher to produce the first proof. And I'm expecting the first proof next week. So it will be published probably in 2023, probably in autumn 2023. And this will be the first ever theory of everything. And it has matrices, mathematical matrices at the end. And this is in keeping with, this book will be further to what I've done in my 60 books. So in my 60 books, I've tried to show mysticism in the light of civilization. I've been into the history of mysticism and given examples of what all the mystics had experienced and what can be experienced now. I've tried to see all literature as one, as a whole. And I've written a book called A New Philosophy of Literature. which sees the whole of literature in every country as having one fundamental theme, which is the quest or search for the one reality, beginning with Gilgamesh in Iraq in 4,000 years ago, more than 4,000 years ago, and being followed by me eventually, and also social condemnation of follies and vices, social satire, condemnation of what's socially wrong. And that's Horace, the Roman poet, and it's English poets like Pope and so on. So, and that's reflected throughout the world, those two strands. And I've tried to see in my universalism the new philosophy of universalism. That's here. So you see the Big Bang at the bottom and the universe expanding and the surfer on the top. My question to everyone is, where is the surfer on the top? His feet are in space-time. Where is his body at the end of the expanding universe? And his body is in the infinite. So both the infinite and the finite are united in my theory of everything. So plus A, the finite, what we see, what we can see and touch, plus minus A, the infinite, what is invisible, metaphysical, equals zero, are united in a unity. So philosophy and the sciences, we've just been talking about the sciences, in all the sciences are included in my theory of everything. So when that's out, then by all means, let's talk again. It's too complicated to do now. And then religion is in the fire and the stones. History, I've talked about, the rise and fall of civilizations. In international politics and statecraft, I've talked about ending in the world state and world constitution. You can't get any higher, or that is the maximum that putting humankind at the beginning of the top of everything can do. And also, I wrote a book called The Secret American Destiny, which is really about world culture. And has America got a secret destiny to bring in the world state I was describing, where America is not dominant, and have all the world culture, secular and metaphysical, united. So that is where we're at. So the book about the theory of everything will include all that and bring it all together. And I'm 83 now, so by the time I'm 90 or 95, everything will be interconnected and one unity. And when I gave a conference to India about those three books, World Government, World State, and World Constitution, one of those there said, you do realize, don't you, these books will be read in 30 years' time. So I hope that that's what happens, that I'm leaving behind something that will benefit humankind in 30 years' time. So I would say to all Russians, I have a tremendous respect from a very early age for Russian literature. And I've read many Russian books. My father gave me in English, Quietly Flows the Don, one of the books that I was reading before I was even 10. And so I have a great respect for Russian culture, and also the Russian Orthodox religion, and the vision of politics that Russia's had to improve the life of the poor, as happened at the beginning of the 20th century. And I understand what Lenin thought. Lenin was really a universalist. Lenin called himself a communist, but communism is a form of universalism because everything is one, everything is a unity. He saw the unity of all humankind, and that is what universalism sees. And if you like, universalism is like being a cousin, perhaps not a brother, but a cousin of communism. So the thinking is very similar, not just your own nation state, but to think more widely. So I would say to all Russians, any conflict has a solution. Beneath every opposite, there is a unity. All opposites are reconciled within the universe. Day and night are opposites, but they coexist. They happen together. Life and death are a part of the universe. They have a place and a time. And with this there, and with the thinking culture that I know Russia has, and I saw again in 2019 when I was in Moscow, please think really carefully about, not now, now is not for me, that's for other people to negotiate and work out policies, and that's for politicians and it's for others. But please think where you're going next, what happens after the solution to the present war. And see if you would like to be part of a new world order of the kind I've described, where all humankind has a place, and Russia's skill in seeing, like Lenin, a universalist answer to humankind, and like Ezra Pound, who was also a universalist. See if Russia's skill and experience in this can really make a contribution to help set up this new state. I've already set up the universal state of the earth, the USE, in 2015 for the World Philosophical Foundation. Igor Kondryshin and I set it up, a Russian. So I've set up a world state already with Igor Kondryshin because I wanted to show that Plato's republic, ideal world state is possible. So I created one in Athens, 2 miles away from Plato's academy. And that is still out there. But realistically, even though there's a world state in waiting there, it's all humankind. We're talking about much larger than that, really, about 7 billion, 8 billion involved in the New World Order, and all of them happy in different ways, and free, and able to be at peace, and to have the chance of being prosperous. A completely new world order. So please help make it possible. And how this happens, I don't know. Those who think like this must get together. The UN need to know about it. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres needs to know about it. I would hope President Putin, who I was in touch with at a distance in 2019, gets to hear about this. It would be good if one of his advisors could see today's interview and report to him, perhaps, just as I hope that one of Biden's advisors will report to him about this, will see it and report to him. Incidentally, I would like to ask you where this video will go and whether it's possible to have a copy so I can send it to different people to draw their attention to it. I don't know whether that's possible. Would you be able to send me a copy of what we've had so I can make it? Thank you. Sorry? If possible, if possible, if possible. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. But to all Russians out there, we in the West are thinking about you. We in the West who have loved many aspects of Russian life wish you well in a very difficult time when people are wishing you ill. And it's a time that will be resolved. And I'm not talking about the present, I'm talking about the future and what happens next. And can we all meet again, as the Queen said, we'll meet again. Can we all meet again out there in the future when we've overcome the difficulties of the present time? So by all means, the key people in the world need to be aware of this and to support it. And so please do anything you can just to spread the word that there is a plan to benefit all humankind and not just a few. Thank you very much for listening to me today. And thank you. And thank you. And thank you. Bye.